White. It can be anything. White as in the White House. White as in the crisp sheets of a hospital bed. For me, it meant both. My life has always been a pair of opposites. On one hand, people perceived me as a success story. On the other hand, a complete failure. And I mean complete failure, like think The Last Airbender bad. But before I get there, let me introduce myself. I'm Ananya Cleetus, a former junior at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and the founder of Anemone. I've never been on The Ellen Show, but I might be a familiar name around campus from UIUC memes for underfunded teens. If you're from Pittsburgh like I am, you might have even heard of Ananya Cleetus Day, which the mayor declared in the city for my accomplishments. But I think I'm actually more proud of the memes, though. For those of you who aren't familiar with UIUC memes, it's basically a Facebook group dedicated to memes about the student life and culture at University of Illinois. It has over 29,000 members and was started as a meme group based on a meme class I taught with my friend at the university's computer science SAIL program. But let me get to the beginning. You've probably heard this story before in some form. The perfect child gone wrong. Well, mine's a tad bit different. Or maybe not that different? I don't know. Everything for me started off perfectly on a cold December evening, the 27th, when I was born in New Delhi. As a kid, we moved around a lot, to Hong Kong, Louisville, St. Louis, and finally Pittsburgh. Everything seemed fine. Too fine, in fact. No one could predict what was brewing under the surface. Back to White. White as in the White House Science Fair. When I was 16, I was selected to present a robotic prosthetic hand I developed at the White House Science Fair to President Obama. I remember waiting in the White House atrium, just waiting for my chance to say, "Thanks, Obama," to the man himself. But I couldn't focus. Cameras flashed over the sound of students talking about their latest inventions. Everyone was focused on the presenters and, of course, on the president, but my mind was elsewhere. White. I remember my first hospitalization as if I've come here just straight from discharge. But of course, then I'd be wearing a different sort of gown. I remember waiting in the room, a completely empty room, by the way. Where else do they keep the psych patients? Wondering what would happen to me. I counted the ceiling tiles, wondering where they would send me. I knew it would be no Shutter Island, but American Horror Story? Maybe something like that? As it turns out, this wasn't my last hospitalization, not by a long shot. But let's go back to the Ananya you all would rather hear about. When I was a kid, I had all the boxes checked off, like any overachieving Asian kid. IB diploma, White House Science Fair, founder of my own startup. I'd lie and say I had good grades too, but I'll be real with you guys. Beyond that, though, I was every Indian's dream child. In reality, though, I felt like I was leading a double life. Think Jekyll and Hyde, but brown and younger. And I definitely don't go around caning people to death in dark alleys. But besides that, Hyde for me was the failure, Ananya, the one who let people down. On one hand, I was the kid who had patents at age 16, but on the other hand, I was the severely depressed kid hiding my feelings from my parents. And believe me, it wasn't easy. Although my parents are very liberal and open-minded, they're still Indians. And Indians don't talk about mental illness. For my fellow Desis out there in the audience, you know what I'm talking about. It's always hidden out of view, swept under the rug. No one wants to admit there's something wrong with their child. In fact, I saw a meme recently on subtle curry traits, which is an amazing group, by the way, that said, "Depression is like sex. Indian parents think their kids don't have it." But just think about that for a second, that jokes aside, that mental illness could be as taboo as drugs, partying, and premarital sex. Anyway, I had a lot of serious issues when I was growing up in high school, ranging from mood swings to suicidal ideations, but things started to really spiral out of control with me when I went to college. My freshman year, I almost got kicked out of my dorm building for so many visits from the police for suicidal ideation. And all this while, I felt like everything was my fault. That the reason I was worrying my friends, my family, and alienating everyone around me was because I was unlikable or unlovable in some way. That I had some basic character flaw or something somewhere that I had just made a wrong decision that led me to where I was. Well, it soon emerged that I was actually bipolar. For those of you unfamiliar with the illness, bipolar disorder is characterized by excessive mood swings between manic and depressive states. It affects nearly 5.7 million Americans yearly and starts in your early teens and 20s. Perfect timing for freshman year. Here's a look at what your brain looks like versus what it looks like when you're bipolar. As you can see, there's a clear difference. This is a very real illness. It's not just the lyrics of a Katy Perry song or a term you call your girlfriend when she changes her mind a few too many times. It's a real, debilitating illness, and it can affect anyone. Through my visits at the hospital, I've met people who've done things such as gamble away their entire life savings while being manic, to drink themselves to near death in a stage of depression. I've met people who've ruined their relationships, their families, and their lives through this illness. And I guess they met me. The next part of my story is the phone call, the one telling my parents I have to leave the university due to too many suicide attempts. While all this was happening, I was lying in a bed on a ventilator at OSF Heart of Mary after having just been resuscitated. I don't remember it too well, but I'm sure the bed had those same whitish sheets. Now, it became clear at this point that I had failed, that it was the end. There was nothing my robotic hand, my startup, or President Obama could do to change that. I had failed. But you guys are smart. You know that's not really the end of my story. I wouldn't be here if my story was that depressing. I suppose I could stand here and tell you guys my whole story, but that wouldn't really make a difference. You'd sit here, feel bad for me for the next hour, or if you're especially heartless, maybe the next 20 minutes, and then move on with your lives. So instead, I'm going to make this talk about everyone. About Anthony Bourdain, about Robin Williams, about Kate Spade, about the roommate you have who drinks himself to sleep every night, about the girl you knew from high school who ended up in the hospital when you were too afraid to check in on her, about the kid you know is struggling but are too afraid to talk to. This talk is about all of us. And for those of us in colleges, you'll know that it's just that much harder for us to get the help we need. Every day I read stories about students who are struggling with their mental illness in the midst of their education, students being shunned, students being turned away, students being sent home, students feeling isolated and alone, and students committing suicide. According to statistics by the National Alliance on Mental Illness, 1 in 4 students has a diagnosable mental illness. 40% do not seek help. 50% are so anxious that they struggle in school, and 8% of students in the ages of 18 to 25 have suicidal ideations. But the problem is that universities don't have the resources to support them, and we end up with things such as limits on how many appointments each student can have, insufficient appointment times, too few psychiatrists and counselors, and just inadequate resources in general. In fact, the average student-to-counseling staff ratio is 1,737 to 1. So for an auditorium of this size of about 600 people, that's 1/3 of a counselor to handle everybody in this room. That's how bad the problem is. I recently posted this meme on UIUC memes and was surprised to see how many students actually agreed with me about the counseling center. It prompted a serious discussion with a representative about how there aren't enough mental health service workers in the industry. But you don't see anybody talking about that. No, instead, we just go to Red Lion or any other bar on campus and pretend like we're all fine. And it's not just us, it's trickling down to the next generation too. I read an article in The Economist that says Generation Z is the most stressed, depressed, and exam-obsessed generation. And I'm sure you guys can all relate to that. So here's my question. What happens after Gen Z? We run out of the alphabet and run out of time. So here's where my story gets better. I went home after being sent home from school, and after crying for weeks, and I mean literally weeks, I decided to do something about it. I know I wasn't the only student struggling from mental illness, and probably not the only one who had been sent home from my university. I had a few options. I could post on Facebook about it. I could retweet Robin Williams quotes if I wanted. I could even post the suicide hotline number. But honestly, I don't think those things are enough. So that's my hot take of the day, you guys. I don't think any of that is enough. I think we need to do more. So I decided to go one step further and apply my own skill set, software engineering. I mean, I had 1/2 of a CS degree, might as well get my money's worth, right? So I ended up making an app called Anemone. And it's interesting, actually, that when phones cause so many of the issues we face today, that they actually end up being part of the solution. I think in today's society, we need new digital tools to manage mental health. As someone who spends way too much time on Instagram and Snapchat, trust me, I would rather have an app than a piece of paper. It's funny, actually, when you're discharged from a psych hospital, they usually make you fill out this clunky packet of papers known as a crisis plan, where you fill out important information about your go-to plan if you're ever in a mental health crisis. But let's be real, who's going to go fumbling around for a packet when they're on the brink of ending their life? I can't even find my homework 20 minutes before class. So here's what I decided to do. I made Anemone, an app that basically is a crisis plan for your phone. In addition to a crisis plan, it allows users to store information such as medications they're on, symptoms they're experiencing, steps they can take, emergency contacts they might have, or treatment facilities they prefer. It also has emergency resources such as local suicide hotlines, text lines, hospitals and centers they can reach out to if they need help. It has coping skills such as grounding, mindfulness, and diversion, and a grounding box for them to feel more positive. Let me walk you through it. So the first part of my app is the crisis plan, where the user can basically swipe through the card step by step and fill in information to create a completely customized plan for themselves. They can take it on the go wherever they want or share it with whomever they want. They can export it and save it and share it with family, friends, and law enforcement. The next part of my app is the emergency resources. It contains one-click buttons that connect the user directly to the help that they need if they're ever in an emergency situation. The next part is the coping skills. Now, these are really important skills taught in most partial and inpatient hospitalization programs. As someone who's been around the block many times, trust me, these skills are truly life-saving. The last part is the grounding box. So the user basically uploads a photo and song of their choice that reminds them of a positive memory or experience they may have had. Whenever they revisit the page, they can feel grounded in that memory. They can also click on the seahorse for positive affirmations. So the point of the app is basically to empower people to manage their own mental health. It contains coping skills to lessen one's suffering, a grounding box to feel more positive, a crisis plan to take care of oneself, and emergency resources in case the situation gets dire. While suicides are the second leading cause of death among students, I truly believe they are preventable. Even though we don't have enough therapists and counselors, students have the capacity to manage their own mental health if given the right tools. As someone who's felt suicidal impulses, I know that there's a point where it feels like nothing else matters, where you feel all alone and you search for any sign, any reason, any excuse just to end it all. But I know that when you reach that point, that tipping point, that even the smallest little bit of help from others can keep you from sinking lower. So the story ends well, and Ananya is invited back to give a TEDx talk. While I wouldn't want to revisit the past few years or wish them upon anyone, I can honestly say that every struggle and every episode has led me to be the person I am today. As much as I despise red Jell-O and microwavable hamburgers, my times in the hospital were really meaningful. They taught me how to learn more about myself, empower myself to manage my health, and create a product that will eventually lead out others to be able to manage their own mental health. So I learned that I wasn't the failures as Mr. Hyde or the successes as Dr. Jekyll, that I was both of those people. I wasn't just the person I wanted to be in front of my parents, professors, and nosy Indian aunties. I wasn't just the person feeling broken in the back of the ambulance. No, I was both of those people, and that's who I truly am. So before I'd like to end this talk, I'm going to leave you with 3 takeaways. And of course, no talk is complete without some Star Wars quotes. So, number 1, be yourself. If you ever feel like there's a part of you that doesn't belong, trust me, it does. Remember those parts and channel them into something more positive. I'm sure everyone's parents at some point has made them feel like they need to be someone else. Don't forget who you truly are, though. But if you're Indian, drugs, partying, and premarital sex are still taboo. That hasn't changed. Number 2, if the door gets slammed in your face, try again. I recently reapplied to UIUC after my year-long medical withdrawal and found out that I was reaccepted. Honestly, I would have given up if it wasn't for my parents. So shout out to my dad who drove 9 hours to come hear me talk. And Mom, you are my rock and you know it. And the last thing is speak up. When you see someone struggling, speak up. When you're feeling low and you're too afraid to talk to your dad about it, knock on his door and talk to him. When you see your friends struggling behind in classes and isolating themselves, reach out. Challenge yourself to help each other, support one another, and talk about this taboo topic. If you can, challenge yourself to do even more. Start a support group, become a peer specialist, create a forum online for others to chat. Honestly, the possibilities are endless. Even philosophy majors can probably find something to do. So, anyway, thank you guys. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you to the 600 people who listened to me. Thank you to the 5 who laughed at my jokes. I'd love to chat with you guys later and connect with you all. Thank you.